Well, after the premiere of Dune, a film based on an iconic novel by Frank Herbert, there is an ongoing debate whether director Denis Villeneuve succeeded at this task. However, I knew by the 10th minute that Dune was going to win the Oscar for Best Costume Design, and that the victory for Best Makeup was inevitable. I knew when I found out the way plastic makeup and some new bodies for Stellan Skarsgård were made. In this video, I want to give you more details of the costumes, which are always insidiously neglected. I know that all eyes will actually be on Timothée Chalamet, but trust me on this, I have something to surprise you. For example, if you're a fan of the fashion house Balenciaga, you'll immediately recognize look 29 from the 2015 collection, in costume of everyone's favorite, Paul Atreides. And that's just the beginning. We'll also go through the most elaborate Fremen stillsuit, Lady Jessica's stunning looks, walk through the costumes of the fearless and sinister Harkonnens, and of course look at Timothée Chalamet and the inimitable Zendaya from top to toe. If you are not familiar with the book like myself, the plot of the movie may seem complicated at first, but in fact, the story turns out to be pretty intuitive. In order to fully immerse ourselves in the fantasy universe and feel the atmosphere of Dune, we have to look into the dressing room and figure out how the costumes were created. Inviting Jacqueline West and Bob Morgan as costume designers, Villeneuve told them, "I don't want boring sci-fi or video games." Jacqueline, who had already created costumes for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Invasion, and Bob Morgan, who had worked on Inception and Maleficent, began to think how to please Villeneuve. From all over the world to Budapest were invited about 200 people into the costume department to work together as one mechanism in order to create costumes for Dune. When reading the script, production designer Patrice Vermette realized that the task was challenging, so he decided to create a book of illustrations, which would include sketches of each set, all the items and decorations and costumes. And what about inspiration? Where were Jacqueline and Bob looking for references for the costumes, apart from the book, of course? Danny was constantly chatting up about nomads and desert people, so they started to explore the way people dressed to survive in the harshest deserts of Afghanistan and Jordan. Jacqueline herself is an expert at creating historical costumes. However, despite this luggage of knowledge, she still picked up a few ideas from the fashion house Balenciaga. She wanted a combination of both futuristic and medieval. Jacqueline and Bob were also inspired by the colors of the planets where the characters lived. Each house, like in Game of Thrones, has its own characteristics and symbols. Atreides' costumes are mostly dusky green and blue shades because the planet Caladan is cool and humid, and it's often rainy there. You won't believe it, but after surfing the web, I came across the military uniforms of the Romanov royal family, and it seems to be the reference for the Atreides character. In service or in combat, Atreides wore gray armor, and off the battlefield, the uniforms were more lightweight and resembling the pilot's suit. In the film, the images of the Harkonnens are presented mostly in black, not only because it's sheer evil, but also because it's always dark and gloomy there. And even Baron Vladimir, the leader of the Harkonnens, takes black herbal baths. We'll discuss his makeup in details a bit later. All the Harkonnens have very pale skin, which seems even more pale and cold against the black suits, a perfect illustration of a planet of evil. The Harkonnens look almost like insects in their black scaly armor and helmets resembling ants' heads. Without their helmets, they're not much prettier either. They have no hair, and specifically for them, the makeup artist Donald Mowat has created a special makeup of alabaster tone. He also used makeup to remove their eyebrows. As for the Sardaukar, the Emperor's ruthless elite fighters, their costumes were designed with white armored suits and with red insignia that were glowing ominously in the dark. The warriors were given more muscular appearance with beards, slicked back hair, and forehead tattoos. Now we have the EACHEST planet, which is a rocky desert, so the costumes of the natives had to have sandy yellow and beige shades. For Stilgar, the leader of the Fremen, Mowat created ethnic tattoos and makeup around the eyes, which suits Javier Bardem perfectly. The Fremen who inhabit Arrakis are easily recognizable by their blue eyes, the result of inhaling spices. For each Fremen featured in the film was created its own image, based on a unified stillsuit. The well-functioning stillsuit allowed the wearer to survive in the open desert for a week. That was a tight jumpsuit, usually covering the whole body down to the neck and wrists. In addition to the stillsuit, gloves were worn on the hands. Its thin, multi-layered fabric was designed to dissipate heat, also to filter and cool body liquids, sweat, and other excretions. The concept art for these suits were drawn by artist Keith Christensen. The main challenge was its uniqueness. They were worn by almost every actor, and each costume consisted of over 100 parts, and all of them had to be cut, assembled, and fitted to the costume on the figure. Plus, the materials had to be chosen correctly so that the actors felt comfortable when they moved. Then, when costumes were ready, they were complemented with veils and capes in the style of desert tribes, which also served as camouflage in the desert. Paul Atreides looks owe their origins in part to Lawrence of Arabia, as well as to Dr. Zhivago by David Lean. For example, the polo shirt is inspired by the look of Omar Sharif in that film. In the future, according to Jacqueline, there will be no buttons or zips. Therefore, the shirt has magnets so it can be undone instantly. And speaking of Balenciaga, Jacqueline was clearly inspired by the Fall/Winter 2015 collection. Just look how similar Paul's suit is to the Alexander Von collection. Jacqueline also asked for sand and rocks from Jordan because the Flying God's cape was supposed to blend completely with the desert of Arrakis. Paul also had a long Moroccan-style cape made for him. The choice of gauze fabric over similarly textured cotton or linen is very symbolic, as Gaza City in the Middle East is the birthplace of gauze fabric, and this region was the source of the visual references for planet Arrakis. Lady Jessica's wardrobe is very different, and in the film she changes clothes 4 times. In Caladan, she was in a dark, almost monkish look, which is very similar to Princess Leia's white outfit from Star Wars, by the way. She also wore a blue dress, which perfectly matches the 2 main elements of her home planet, water and wind. On Arrakis, she appeared in a sandy orange dress with a translucent cape in the Arabian traditions, and after her escape, she tries on a stillsuit and wears a gauze cape. As for makeup, there is hardly any, and she has her hair always pulled back. Most of the time, her head is covered. In some cases, she even covers her face with a veil. And this is just a deliberate hint of her two-faced nature. She has plenty of power, but not of the right kind. She is more of a protector, one step behind Leto, out of sight. For Reverend Mother Mohiam, the artists have chosen a combined image of 2, the Chess Queen and the Tarot Lady of Marseilles. The austere black suit consisting of a floor-length velvet dress with long sleeves and a cape. Her high headdress reminds us of a Greek monk's camlockin, which is lined with black velvet and completed with a black beaded veil, covering the face. Basically, the image is of women completely covered with cloth, black as on the planet Wallach 9, or white as on the planet Arrakis, refer us to the Muslim world. When creating the outfits for Chani, played by Zendaya, Bob was inspired by National Geographic's iconic cover shot of the Afghan girl. Chani comes from the nation of nomadic Fremen, so she has to wear a stillsuit and a special accessory for the nose. In the movie, we're repeatedly shown Paul's dream, a flashback where she appears in a long-sleeved dress similar to a traditional Moroccan dress. She's a symbol of all that is good in Paul's life, but also Chani is a warrior in spirit, so the rest of the time she still wears a stillsuit and cape. But the hardest job was the body of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. It was a whole epic, recalls the makeup artist Moat, given that Stellan Skarsgård was in a naked, full-length silicone suit. By the way, the Baron's prototype was based on Marlon Brando's characters from Apocalypse Now and the Island of Dr. Moreau. In order to create the costume, they kept the actor steady for almost 2 hours under heavy layers of silicone and plaster casts to make a cast of the body. And then, Villeneuve looked at the costume and decided he liked it better naked, so Jacqueline West had to come up with a costume without a costume and show him in the buff with a little bit of a light translucent cloth. Of course, for this handsome man, a Stockholm studio created 6 images, and 2 Spanish sculptors spent hours making the body shapes look, so to speak, natural. It got complicated when they started testing the suit in the water. The scene where the Baron takes a bath. The suit was too floaty, and it wasn't easy to get into the water in it. It became even more of a problem when it started to soak up so much water like a sponge that it was almost impossible to get it out. A hole had to be made to get the seatbelts through because, according to the plot, the Baron was also supposed to fly, and the process of getting into the costume was taking almost 7 hours. First, they put a cooling waistcoat on him. Then they hid his hair under the fake baldness and put on a fake neck. Then it was time to sculpt the chin, cheeks, and ears, and then the next step was the arm pads, weighing about 4 kilograms, followed by the muscular inner suit and then just the skin. And Dune's main villain looks simply stunning. So fans of the movie and book, I'm waiting for your opinion in the comments. Write in, what do you think? Will Dune win the Oscar for Best Costume Design? If you liked the video, like it, subscribe to the channel, and all that. Bye!